Thank you for joining me on another episode of She Leads Now podcast, where we help career and entrepreneurial women gain the tools to develop a success mindset, create winning strategies, build collaborative relationships, and take bold action towards creating impact and fulfillment in their lives and careers. I'm your host, Sabine Gideon, and I'm on a mission to awaken and activate women and emerging leaders so they can tap into their innate leadership ability, elevate their influence, and create the impact they were destined to make. If you're ready to uplevel your confidence, courage, and influence, you've come to the right place. Join me weekly for insights, strategies, and resources to help you grow, develop, and embody the leader you were meant to be, so that you can make the impact you know you are called to make and establish the legacy you've always dreamed. The world eagerly awaits the emergence of your brilliance, impact, and influence. So with that, let's dive into this week's episode. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the She Leads Now podcast. Joining me today is Shakeena Johnson. Shakeena is a life and business coach, and she is also the founder of JSR Vision. And today, Shakeena is going to be talking to us about how to be yourself while designing a business and life you love. So with that, and without further ado, welcome to the show, Shakeena.
Thank you. Glad to be here, Sabine.
Awesome. Excited to have you. Excited to hear more about you, your experience, your background. You, like many others and myself, made that transition from corporate to entrepreneurship and have been in the game for some time now, helping to support people in transition as well as other business leaders. So with that, tell us a little bit about what it is that you do today and who you support and what drew you to that kind of work.
Yeah, so who I typically help entrepreneurs get out of their own headspace, right? So that could be any number of individuals or professionals. They tend to be coaches, consultants, just online service professionals. But what I really enjoy doing is helping those who are transitioning. And so it follows along the kind of like my story, how I started in corporate and transitioned out. I found that there was a lot of head junk going on and floating around in our head, right? About like what I shouldn't do, all the restrictions we place on ourselves. And so I wanted to help people who are more like myself just get out of their own head and move forward. So that's been my mission, to just help those doing the same thing.
Okay, great. So what if any were, the catalyst, right? That turning point for you where you were just like, okay, either there's more out there for me, or I feel this calling or this pull towards entrepreneurship. What was that for you?
Have you ever sat at a cubicle and like you're sitting at your desk and you're like, I am so over this. You've done the work, you've spoken to the people, and it's not the people. It has nothing to do with your coworkers or anything. And you can do all the work fine. You're an expert at what you do, and you're sitting there, you're like, there's got to be more to life than just sitting here and doing this thing. I was that person where I'm sitting at my desk and I'm like, it's not that I don't like y'all. I'm sure I like y'all, but I don't want to be here. There's got to be something else for me to do. There's got to be, I have too many skills and talents to just be sitting here behind a desk trying to figure out how to do this thing. So my catalyst was that, coming to work every day and trying to figure out, there's got to be more to this. And it's just a simple day in and day out, same type of schedule. And because I have a legal background, litigation background, we did all the things. Paralegal, let me be clear, I'm not an attorney, but I did all the things, all the paperwork from pre-lit, litigation, and everything in between. And I'm like, I can do this with my eyes closed. There's no challenge in this for me. And so I asked the question, what else can I do? Where else can I go? What is out there for me that presents some form of challenge? And so it just catapulted me into trying to figure out what to do. And what I mean by that is it didn't come naturally. I actually experimented for a while before I found my thing. I think that's always important, but that's really where it started. Me just sitting there, just what the hell am I doing here?
I love it. And your story is not unlike others. And that's certainly very similar to my story, except I ignored and told myself, all right, if you just go back to school and get a degree, then it opens new doors for you. And found myself in that same space. And I'm pretty sure, those listening can resonate with that, regardless of whether or not you are in the entrepreneur space, or you're still, employed and working and climbing up the ladder. There comes a time where all of us have that moment where we're really like, are we going to do this again another day? So kudos to you for listening to that voice that first time around and making this leap. And so now my understanding is you are now helping and supporting people who are in that same space, right? Who are at that same, like, there's got to be more there's got to be more to life, but I may not be 100% clear on what that next, leg of the journey is. And so you help them gain clarity in moving forward, whether that's to another organization or whether that's into entrepreneurship. Is that correct?
It's typically towards entrepreneurship. So those who are transitioning they're in a place of, all right, I know I'm not supposed to be here. Let me work on this side hustle, side gig, and turn that into a business. Or it's those who have decided to fully transition into their business, and they're having a little bit of trouble as well. So we talk about, like you said, vision, clarity, and other business things inside of that. But a lot of it is just we're in our own way.
Yeah. And I want to go back to that because I know that that's an area that you really like to focus on. I like to call it the inner critic, right? Mm-hmm. That voice in our head that at every moment is tearing us down, really trying to protect us, but in some ways tearing us down. So talk a little bit more about some of the work you had to do from a mindset perspective to even get to the place of clarity of, okay, this is what my side hustle is going to be, or when I launch and I make this leap, this is what I'm going to do. What are some of the things that came up for you that you had to navigate and work through?
So a little different for me. I've always had a side hustle, if you will. So college student, I always had something going on. So whether it was writing, web designing, or whatever that was, I always had something. So even when I was in litigation, it was, I'm going to go home and do my thing now, right? But when I decided to go in a different path than the legal industry, it was, okay, I don't know what I want to do because I've either done a lot of things or I don't know what else interests me. So what I started with was completely experimenting. And I just decided I'm just going to do the thing. So I don't really care if I fail at it. I don't really care if it doesn't make sense. I don't care if everybody's looking at me like, what the hell is she doing? I didn't care. I don't have that problem. But it was what started it was let me figure out. I started with a list. This is what I'm interested in. And let's explore that and see where that takes me. An example of that is I love writing. And so I was like, maybe I could write for other people. So I was like, and because I'm business minded, I'm like, how can I make this into a business? Right. So I, started reaching out to people. People would come to me for copywriting or blogging or whatever. I quickly learned I love writing. I don't like writing for other people. So I crossed that one off my list and went down to the next thing. And that's just how I experimented and played with a lot of. That's also how I gained a lot of the experience that I have now, just through experimentation in and of itself. But some of the challenges I faced was after I went through like a few different types of things, I realized I can do a lot of different things, but I don't really know what's passionate enough for me because I'm naturally curious. I also had one of the struggles that I had was because I jumped from one thing to another, how are people going to perceive that about me? Which is a strange thought to have for me because I've never struggled with self-esteem issues or confidence issues. But when I realized people could see that inconsistency in what I'm doing, like she's a copywriter for 2, 3, 4 years, right? Now she's doing what now for 2, 3, 4 years? And now she's doing something else. And I'm like, my brain was like, Okay. So that makes me feel some kind of way if people think that I'm inconsistent. So one of the struggles that I had to overcome was the variety of the skill set that I've learned and jumping from one thing to another. How I got over that was acknowledging that I am the sum of all of my experiences, and I bring that to the table when I speak to people. So I know a little bit, just enough to have a conversation with people, or I'm expert enough in a particular thing to walk you through something, and that's just based off of my experience. So I had to get over that, but it took me a while to go through that. I did a lot of journaling because I love the journal, again, writing for myself. But a lot of journaling, a lot of writing, and just kind of reflecting on what makes me me and just being okay with that.
I love the fact that you went into this, or you've always had this mindset of experimenting. I used to share, and I still share, for people who are kind of in that space of like, well, what's next? Making a list, right? I usually say your two lists: your top 50 accomplishments, right? Big and small in life up until this point, and don't stop until you get to 50, but you can certainly move past that. And then a list of 25 things that if money were no object, time were no object, responsibilities were no object, that you would want to try. And then looking at those lists and identifying what are some of the common themes, and then prioritizing the things that you want to focus on based on that. And so I love that you made this list and you started just doing. And, it's funny what you say about the consistency in terms of like the services that you were offering. I think at the core, that's what an entrepreneur is, right? Like an entrepreneur looks for a problem, figures out a solution, and then offers it. And when that dries up or they've lost interest in whatever comes first, then they look for the other problem. So I think that I'm certainly one who is multi-passionate, as they call it, as well. I think that that's a gift. And then what you said around I'm the sum, all of my gifts and all of my experiences, I think that that's such a powerful awareness to have. Because if you think about it, especially for those who are transitioning from corporate to entrepreneurship, when we are in corporate America, like we have our job, right? We have the function that we operate in, and we may have like other departments that we collaborate with that support, but it's very much a siloed mindset around this is my domain. And entrepreneurship, the beauty of it is that it allows you to explore all of the things, right? It may not be the business that you create, but it allows you to explore so much more of who you are, your gifts, your talents, and your abilities. So I absolutely love that you allowed yourself and you gave yourself the space to go through that process, to try those things, and then also recognize where, when you had those moments of your inner critic showing up, being able to say, you know what? Yeah, I am. I like doing a lot of things. And that doesn't take away from the fact that, I'm able to be successful as an entrepreneur.
A lot of times when people are transitioning from corporate to their own business, they tend to want to throw away all of their experience, not acknowledging that, again, they are the sum total of all of their experiences and everything they've learned up until that point. And so they're trying something new. And then there's a fear of, well, I'm not going to get this right. I don't have enough experience. Well, maybe the clients won't like me, or maybe I don't have enough skills to provide them with the service. And it's like, you have to remember, that's why you and I always talk about that brag bio, that we talk, well, I call it a brag bio, but you call it something different.
Brag book,
but,
yeah,
brag book, right? And being able to acknowledge your successes up until that point, because you've had some success. It's just that you're not acknowledging where you came from, what you did, how that impacted other people. And so creating that brag book, that brag bio, is one of those ways to really acknowledge where you've come from and how you can use your experiences to help serve your clients in the most impactful and powerful way that you can. And like I said, a lot of people want to throw that away, but it's about, and Rich Litvin says this, I'm a follower of his, I understand a lot of his work, but he says transcend and include. So transcend your current position, transcend your corporate position or job that you were in. And you may not want to throw it away, but you can include everything you've learned in that position to take you to the next level. So it on the flip side of that is, for example, if I am working if my industry that I used to work in was legal, maybe I don't want to work with attorneys anymore, but I want to use my skill set and experience and knowledge that I've learned to work with maybe real estate professionals. I take what I know and go to a different place and take that experience and be as impactful and educational and as powerful as I can. That's that transcend and include. And I think that people should do more of that when transitioning. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It absolutely does. And, part of that, I love that quote around the transcend and include, because, once you step into entrepreneurship and you're like, I'm in business, you become all the things. You are the CIO, you are the CFO, you are the head of HR, you are all the things. And believe it or not, it's funny because I don't know if you experienced this, but it would be, oh, I did this in X role, or you'll find that somewhere in your journey, you either supported a group or learned just enough to kind of help you get by. So like with sales and business development, I was like a fish out of water that first year. Like, what do? I did recruiting. So I knew how to sell a company. I knew how to sell a job, but my services, that was new to me. And then I had to recall, I used to support the sales team. Like, what did I learn about their process? And so it's funny. We think that, we wake up one day and we're like, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. And this is this new thing to God. Right. But it's just like, no, actually, you've been on a path towards that for quite some time.
Exactly. And it's interesting because, and I just had this conversation with someone last week about it. And so it's kind of interesting that we're talking about it, but it is being everything to everybody for everything in your business, right? When you were first starting, you were wearing all of the hats. That doesn't mean that you need to be an expert in all of those things. So what I ended up telling her was there's different types of entrepreneurs, if you will. We tend to have a lot of ideas that we want to put out there in the world all at the same time, usually. But there's an order. I don't know what you're talking about. Exactly. But there's the ideation to creation. So there's the ideas that you have that we want to put into place. That's the creation part of it. But there's the ideation to delegation when you realize you don't need to be an expert in everything, right? So you have an idea for a system, a service, a product, whatever. That doesn't necessarily mean you need to know how to run the technology or run a funnel or put a system together. You can actually hire out. So even if you are a person who is either tech savvy or understand how to put those funnels together and how to do all those things, like myself, like I know how to do all those things, but I don't have the time. I'm going to delegate that out to somebody, right? Ideation to creation. If you don't have the money or the resources, then you figure it out. If you have resources and time, or you can get somebody else to help you with this, that's ideation to delegation. And that's one of the thoughts that entrepreneurs need to understand. You don't need to be good at everything in your business. Yes, you need to know and understand how your finances are working. Yes, you need to know when you need to pay your taxes. That doesn't mean that you need to be a financial expert because, dear God, sometimes I can't count. We know this. Okay. But that's why I have a CPA, right? You get people to help you execute on the things that you need to. You get the accountant, you get the bookkeeper, you get the marketing expert. You don't need to know all those things. And so you start reducing the number of hats that you're wearing based off of how you delegate. Take those ideas, get them out of your head and delegate them to somebody who can help you execute on those.
Absolutely. And, it's interesting that you say that because I do work with quite a few business owners who, went from that beginning stage of, I got to do all those things. And now as their organization has grown, they now need to grow and they need to shift gears and put on that CEO hat. And you can't be the CEO and the employee in your business. So I think that that's a really, really great point that you put out there. And then the piece around delegating, right? Because it can be hard, especially if you're starting something from scratch, right? Like it's your baby. It's the thing that you envisioned and that you saw. And so when it comes to delegating, I know a lot of entrepreneurs, women particularly, struggle with I'm going to let go of the control. So what advice do you, or what type of counseling or tools have you offered your clients in the past who may have had some trouble transitioning or transforming into that CEO within their business?
So as of right now, I'm working with a lot of attorneys and transitioning professionals, right? And like you said, a lot of women. A lot of women have trouble with this. Knowing what to let go is part of the challenge. Knowing that as a CEO, you are the visionary of your firm and everything else is delegated out. When you are a solo, you have to ask yourself kind of a couple of questions. So one, is this something that I know how to do myself? Yes or no? If it's not, you delegate that out. That's just where that goes, right? And if it is something you can do yourself, do you have the time to do it yourself? Do you have the bandwidth to actually, include that in your schedule for the week, right? Simple question. Yes, I have the resources and the time to do this myself and I know how to. Then you can tinker with it if you want to. Two, no. Okay, no, I don't have the resources or the time. Then you find somebody. Knowing what to delegate, like for people who have smaller teams, some of the advice is bring your assistant in, right? That I give some of these attorneys and some of the professionals. If you have an assistant or a small team, bring your right hand in. Have them sit down with you, go through the system. Let them tell you what they can take off your plate. Like, oh, you don't need to be doing that. Or if you are by yourself, it's just a matter of asking those questions. Do I really want to dedicate my time to this? You can find lower priced help to help you do those things. No, it's not going to be perfect, but your first hire isn't going to be your complete hire, right? You have to educate, you have to train, you have to be open, realizing that, okay, so maybe I actually didn't want it that way. And now you have to change the whole system up again. Or maybe you learn that there's a better way of doing it if that assistant or that person is competent enough to tell you, okay, well, I've seen this done a couple of different ways. Let me help you out with this. You'd be surprised what you can afford when, whether it's a smaller amount or not, when you have somebody to help you, how much further you can go. As a CEO of your firm, of your company, you're the visionary. So you have an idea that you want to make a certain amount of money in a particular year, or you want to incorporate a new system or service in your company, then you know what the system or the service looks like. And then you ask your assistant or your person or whoever, what's the next step? And do I have to do that step or can I delegate that out?
So what I'm hearing you say is it's really around maintaining this mindset of my role or my assignment in this building of this thing is to maintain the role of visionary, and everything else that comes outside of the vision, that from the start, and I wish, many of the things that you're saying now, I wish I would have learned those things in the beginning, because I really had this complex where I felt like, okay, I got to learn all the things. I got to do all the things. And, that's where you can fall into that productivity or more like that busy trap where you think you're being productive, but you're not. So the mindset of visionary, maintaining that and being able to challenge yourself when you aren't operating in that space or when you aren't operating in that identity. I think that's powerful. And to your point, there are a lot of resources, a lot of organizations out there that, provide low cost support and low cost resources. And don't be afraid. I would also give this caution is, sometimes I'll talk about myself. Sometimes I felt like I have to know the exact thing that this person needs to do in order to tell them what it is that they need to do. And so they can carry it out. And I think that it's important to, as you're looking to add on to your team, that you're very clear about what the end result is, but that you give people the space to bring their creativity, to bring, their way of doing something without having to, police, so to speak, how it gets done. So thank you for sharing that.
Some of the best leaders are coaches, right? Coaching in and of itself is about seeing the best in people and getting that out of them, not telling them what to do, not telling them how to do certain things, but knowing that they already have enough of it within themselves that they can do it. Like, we know it's possible as the coach, but as the coachee, they may not know that. It's about knowing and understanding that they have all the things within them and helping them see it for themselves. So much like how I help people grow their business acumen, we're teaching them and coaching them how to grow that life acumen, if you will, that self-awareness, if you will.
Yeah. And, when you look at athletes, when you look at, all these people who are performing really well, part of the reason why they're able to is because they have coaches. And so being able to take that same concept and that same methodology and practice that you see in, what do you call the industry? Sports, that you see in the sports industry, and bringing that into organization is definitely a game changer. Just a couple questions here before we wrap up. And so, I am a firm believer and practicer, I don't even know if that's a word, of networking.
It is now.
And right. And building relationships. And so I'm curious for you, as you've navigated your transition and as you're supporting others and navigating theirs, what role has networking or building relationships through others and with others played in your success within your transition?
100% so. That is one of the best things I have ever done. And I may not do a lot on social media or online, but everything that I have created, all the multiple businesses I've created and people I've talked to, has been because of the relationships I've built. So I think we often forget that there's more to life than online or social media, thinking that we have to be all the things everywhere and every place that, but off the screen, it's about relationship. Be it as it may. In some places, you may or may not have in-person events or whatever, but you can still connect with people, even just something as simple as this. But building those relationships has been one of the best strategies and just things to do overall in my business. And it will continue to be.
Love it. Want to just do our quick little rapid fire here. So books, right? I am a firm believer, and the audience has heard it before, that leaders are readers. So with that, is there any book that stands out to you that has been pivotal in terms of your transition or just overall success as an individual or a leader or business owner that you can recommend or that you would share with the audience?
So there have been so many books that have come across me. One book I think of is Michael Porter's Book Yourself Solid, which I keep on my shelf. Because I am a marketer at heart, I have a lot of other marketing books, but Book Yourself Solid is definitely one. The Wealthy Entrepreneur with Ed Gandia, and I forget the other gentleman that's associated with that. And The Giant Within, Tony Robbins. But I have a giant list of books, so those are the only three that came up.
Yeah, besides the Tony Robbins, The Giant Within, I haven't heard of the other ones. So we'll definitely include those links in the show notes so that you can go ahead and grab those or add them to your wish list on Audible and Amazon. And then lastly, where can our audience connect with you? Where do you hang out on social? I know you're behind the scenes, but where are you hanging out on social as well?
Yeah, so JSR Vision LLC on all of the major social media accounts. So Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. On LinkedIn, it's just Shakeena. It should be Shakeena Wheeler, but you can find me either way. Shakeena Wheeler or Shakeena Johnson. I haven't changed from my maiden name yet, so my husband's going to yell at me for that. Anywho, so JSR Vision on most social media accounts, and then Shakeena Wheeler or Johnson on LinkedIn. So either way.
Awesome. I think it's Johnson. I'm pretty sure it's Johnson.
I changed my maiden name. I haven't changed the link. The URL still says Wheeler.
That makes total sense. And then one last question for you, right? So if you think about the sum total of all of your experiences, even what you're doing today, if you could go back in time, right, and you can start from scratch, or if you could even decide what a plan B would be, what would that look like?
That's an interesting question. what would that look like? What would that be? See, I'm a multi-passionate type person, so I'm not sure. I know it has something to do with writing, creating, and coaching.
Okay.
So if I were to start,
what you do now.
basically, yeah. So if I can go back a decade or almost 2 decades ago to do the very thing that I'm doing, knowing that this is what I'm supposed to be doing, I don't know if I would change that, because I appreciate the experiences I have gone through to get me to where I am now. I'm a big believer of, just going through the journey, because you need to learn something, you need to learn the lesson. And so I would absolutely become a realtor. I would absolutely become a web designer or a copywriter or all those other businesses that I've created, again, just to get to where I am, because that knowledge and experience that I've had along my journey has been pivotal to me understanding myself and the people around me better. So I don't think I would change anything. I think I would just do the same thing I did again.
I love it. I love it. And it's amazing that of the people that I've asked the same question, most people say the same thing. It's like, actually, I needed all of those components. And, we can get into a place, especially as entrepreneurs, where we're like, I wish I was here, or I wish I was doing this, or, we can get that, what do you call it? FOMO, or shiny object syndrome. And it's just like, no, when you ask the question, it's kind of like, actually, I like it here. I like right where I'm at.
It's about comparing yourself to other people, or I wish I was this, I wish I was that. That's usually a form of comparisonitis. You're saying, oh, I wish I was different back then because of somebody else or something else. But you are uniquely you for a reason. There's no competition when you're yourself. There's none. Absolutely none. And so the journey is needed.
Well, thank you so much, Shakeena, for coming on the show. We will definitely share the 3 book recommendations that you have, as well as your correct link to LinkedIn and Instagram and everywhere else. Reach out to Shakeena if you are in this space where you're listening and you have some mind clutter going on and need some support getting out of your own head and your own way. Reach out to Shakeena on social or through her website. With that, I will be back next week with another episode on She Leads Now podcast. Until then, have a wonderful rest of the week. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of She Leads Now. Be sure to join us next week for another transformative discussion to help you grow, develop, and embody the courageous leader you've always been. Be sure to subscribe to the show to get alerts when new episodes drop, and join us for our next Leaders Lounge meetup on Zoom. Details and dates for future sessions are included in the show notes below, so take a look there or head over to SabineGideon.com/lounge to register and hold your spot for the next session. Again, that's SabineGideon.com/lounge to grab your spot. Excited to connect with you all inside the lounge. Talk to you soon.